right, good morning or afternoon, everyone. This is Mark here, and today we're going to go through a little bit on how to set up your Business Central warehouse management configuration. So our goal for today, as my mouse starts working here, our goal for today is really just to do exactly that. Go over the configuration options you have for Business Central. Now, from the sign up, it looks like a number of you are on NAV as well. Most of the concepts we're covering here will work with NAV as well, but we're going to be focusing on the Business Central user interface and everything else. Probably going to take the full hour. There's a lot to cover here. If you have any questions as we're going through the topics, enter them in the question box. May not be able to cover them as we go through the session, but if there's any easy or relevant ones, we'll answer them at the end or afterward. All right, with that, let's get started. Now, when we talk about WMS, warehouse management system, really all that is a tool to manage your warehouse. And hopefully everybody else has got sound. I see that some people aren't getting sound. All right, so back to what is WMS, right? It's warehouse management system. And Business Central has a whole bunch of capabilities built in to manage your warehouse. You don't need the add-ons that are available, and I shouldn't say that because we sell a lot of those add-ons that do extend Business Central to improve the warehouse management capability. But that's part of the reason for this session that we're doing today. In order to put these add-ons that extend Business Central into place, you first need to configure Business Central. Right, so there were a lot of questions on sign up, like how do your products work, everything else. We're not going to cover that today. What we're covering is standard Business Central, the things you need to do to set up your inventory and everything else before you can add in barcoding or fulfillment and all of those other goodies that you can get for Business Central to extend it. All right, so with that, let's jump in and talk about what Business Central actually offers. So Business Central has both standard or basic warehousing and advanced warehousing. When people talk about advanced warehousing in Business Central, what they're typically referring to is directed put away and pick. And that's on the right-hand side, there's a little screenshot from Business Central. And that's that magic checkbox down at the bottom there that enables that directed put away and pick, and that's the advanced warehousing. If you don't have that turned on, you can set all of these individual options you see above here independently for the most part. So you'll see there's a whole bunch of options you can set, which means you've got a lot of flexibility in how you set it up. So even when we talk about basic warehousing, when people say, oh, we're using basic warehousing, well, that could be fairly complex depending on how you set it up. And when you do set up this directed put away and pick, there's also multiple options for how you configure that, right? So different mechanisms for handling bins and all sorts of interesting things. Now we're going to cover off some of these details here in just a sec. So the first one that I wanted to talk about is when you turn on these different checkboxes, we're going to first focus on what we call inventory documents, which is the basic warehousing. And that document choice, in other words, what do you send out to the warehouse? What pieces of paper or what information do you send out to the warehouse, and how do you get that information out of Business Central? That has a big impact on the process. So the three different ways you can, sort of get the guys in the warehouse moving is one is with a report. So if you're not doing any sort of warehouse management, if you've got a sales order and you go and you print the pick list by order, or the picking list report, you just get a report that lists everything on that sales order, but it's sort of warehouse oriented. They can go out, pick the product and ship it out. So if you have very basic requirements, you're likely going to do that. You're just going to print out, the order, the pick list by order or whatever it is off the sales order, and that's what you're going to use for picking. And incidentally, we're going to focus mostly on sort of the outbound, like the picking process here for the examples. The flip side is the receiving process, but almost always when we're doing demos and things like that, people say, well, how do you create a pick, or how do you get the pick out to the floor? So we're going to focus on picking. At any rate, so the first option there is you don't turn on any of the warehousing and you use reports. The next one is what we call an inventory document. And an inventory document is when we turn on things like require pick and require put away, but we don't turn on require shipment and require receive. Now that's a fairly complex description or seems weird, they should have just had a checkbox that says, hey, I want to turn on inventory documents or warehouse documents. But instead you've got multiple things that enable inventory versus warehouse documents. And an inventory document is if you don't need really a two-stage pick process or receiving process, things like that. The last one is the warehouse documents, which gives us sort of the full-blown warehouse management side of it, where we can turn on, sort of a two-stage picking process or two-stage receiving process. Okay, so I'm going to get to this in a sec. We're going to look at inventory and warehouse documents and how they work. We're not going to cover off the reports. The next thing you need to decide, well, probably the first thing you need to decide is if you're going to use bins or not. So bins, if you're doing any sort of serious warehousing or semi-serious warehousing, bins are a very good idea to enable. So Business Central really has three different options for using bins or not. The main one here is this bin mandatory. Turning that on allows us to control inventory by bin. And what that means is, if I've got the same item in multiple places within the warehouse, I know, hey, bin A has 10 and bin X has 50. I know the quantity in each bin. And when I remove product out of each bin, I have to specify which bin I take it from because we're managing the inventory at the bin level. So we have to know which bin we're using. So that does mean there's an extra piece of data you need to worry about. Now, instead of just knowing how much inventory you've taken or moved or sold, you also need to know the bin code that you're dealing with. Okay, so if you're doing a paper-based system, maybe that's overkill. If you never have the same item in more than one place, maybe you don't need bins. And if you turn that off, if you don't have that bin mandatory, you have two other options. One, you can have non-mandatory bins. So for each item, you can list, hey, here are the three potential places you might find that item. Now, you won't know which bin actually has the item in it, but you can list, okay, these are the three places we typically store that item. The other option is shelf number, which is, if you use a stock keeping unit card or right on the item card, it's informational. You can say, oh, normally we find that in bin A, but maybe they didn't put it in bin A today. You've got 20 in stock. Maybe it's in bin A, maybe it isn't. The only way we know for sure where the product is by making that bin mandatory. Okay, now the way this is set up, just to give you an overview of how that all looks sort of from a graphical perspective. If you don't want to use bins, you've got your location. So you need to set up a location. When you're setting up Business Central, you want to have at least one location set up. The demo data and a lot of, sort of the standard setup, it comes with a blank location and you can actually execute everything with a blank location. But if you're storing inventory, you pretty much want to have a default location set up. And in the company information, you can set up that default location. And for all intents and purposes, it's invisible to everybody. It just defaults in everywhere and you use it, but you do want to have one location and you want to set location to be mandatory as well in your inventory setup. And that way you always have that location, because if you do expand it, if you do decide you want a separate location for return to vendor or scrap or things like that, you can actually enable that without too much pain. But at any rate, if you don't want to use bins, you've got your location plus your item master and variant, and that gives you a stock keeping unit card. So if you want location specific inventory management, like min maxes, shelf numbers, things like that, you can use that stock keeping unit card to sort of at least provide information on where that inventory is and some details about that inventory. The other option is using bins. So within a location, you can define zones. Now, zones are only available if you use the advanced warehousing, but whether you use zones or not, you'll have bins enabled, and then the bin plus the item master gets you something called bin content. And bin content is where we put the item specific information, right? So, if you're using the advanced warehousing, we can set mins and maxes on those bins. We can set a bunch of options around those bins. And these two aren't mutually exclusive. I can have bins and stock keeping units. And you would do that if you want to do automated replenishment. So you want to have your, purchase mins and maxes or your transfer order mins and maxes set at the stock keeping unit, but you want to manage your warehouse at the bin level. Okay, so that's important to keep that in mind. And that's it. So now let's actually jump in and have a look at how we set this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the locations here. This a location in Business Central, of course, is your warehouse, virtual warehouse or not. And I've got all the demo locations in the system. So in Microsoft land, they're either colors, or in the newer stuff, they're locations like East, West, Main, that sort of thing. So when we open up one of these locations, this is the blue location. And the blue location, if we open up the warehouse tab here, it has nothing turned on. So a location like this is going to use reports to manage your warehouse. In other words, you're going to go to the sales order, you're going to print a pick list. There's no separate document or anything defined to allow you to pick it. So none of this stuff comes into play. We don't even have bins turned on in this location. So this is sort of a very basic default setting. You might use this for retail stores. Maybe you've got a warehouse and a retail location. Your retail location is probably going to be set up like this, but your warehouse is going to have much more advanced settings on. So let's actually have a look at, sort of the next level up. Now, if you look at the Microsoft documentation, they claim that there's, 6 rough categories of, warehouse configuration you can have. That's a bit of a lie. There's dozens of different ways you can actually set up your locations, right? Just by mixing and matching these options. So if we look at this specific location, we actually have bin mandatory turned on. So in other words, every time we do anything, we're going to reference a bin code. And we've also got something called require pick turned on. And what that means is we're going to need a pick document in order to pick our product. Now, this is a bit of a lie as well. It says require pick, but that means, yeah, you can use picks if you want, but you don't have to. So require is a bit misleading. What that means is if I'm on a sales order, I can still print a report, I can still pick off that report, I can still post a sales order without ever creating a pick document. But what this allows me to do is now create what we call an inventory pick. So now we can go in, generate a separate document that's just for the warehouse for them to execute. And I'll show you how that works. And the same thing with put away. On receiving here, I've got an inventory put away turned on that allows me to go ahead and put stuff away with a separate document instead of just receiving right against the purchase order. If we go one over here, well, 2 over to this location, the distribution center, you notice we have this directed put away and pick turned on. When we turn that on, it forces all of these other checkboxes on, aside from the put away worksheet. And what this does is enforces the warehouse documents. So in the previous example where I had just the require pick turned on, I said that was an inventory pick. To turn that into a warehouse pick, I turn on this require shipment. Okay, so that's how it works. It's a little goofy. If I have require shipment turned on and require pick turned on, that makes it a warehouse pick instead of an inventory pick. Okay, and I can also have require shipment turned on without having require pick turned on, and I can just use warehouse shipments as my mechanism for fulfilling orders. So I can generate a warehouse shipment document and they pick against that and ship against that instead of looking at the sales order. So by now you're going, I don't understand any of this stuff because that's all weird. And you're right, it is weird. That's kind of why we're doing this call. So what we're going to do is go in and actually have a look at how these things play out. Before I do that, let's talk a little bit about how we set up bins. So I'm going to go back to my silver location here because that one's easy. And if I hit zones, there's no zones defined because you can't have zones set up if you don't have the directed pick and put away turned on, which is kind of annoying because it's kind of an artificial limitation where it'll yell at you. It should have yelled at me there, but it'll yell at me if I try and set up bins on that zone. So I'm going to delete it. But yeah, anyway, you can't use zones. I won't rant about why it should work and doesn't. But anyway, you can't use zones in non-directed locations. But what you can do is set up bins. So when we set up the bins, basically you can give it any name you want. And again, you can't use zones if you're in a non-directed location. We'll talk about what zones give you in a sec. But you can set up your bin codes, your description. Most of these things here, other than the empty and the block movement and the dedicated, most of these here are only useful if you have the directed pick and put away turned on, okay? And for most people, you won't need that. But what I'm gonna do is just quickly tell you what some of these things are. So dedicated, what that does is allows you to flag a bin as dedicated to a specific work center or assembly area, things like that, so that we can't pick from that. So what that means is if we're in the standard basic warehousing, you can mark one of these things as dedicated, and you won't be allowed to pick from that bin. So the system will never suggest that you pick product from that particular bin. This empty here just tells us if there's product in it or not. And if we want to see what's in that product, we can go ahead and go in and look at the bin contents. And again, this is where we get the item specific information about that particular bin. So that bin has these two items in it, and we can see the quantities of each. This fixed here on the bin contents. Now again, these are item specific properties for that specific bin. This fixed, what that means is this item here is always associated with this bin here. So you'll notice the quantity on here is 0, but this bin content record still exists. We still know this item belongs in this bin, even though there's 0 there. So there was a question earlier on why does this keep disappearing? Well, this record above it where it says fixed and it's not set, what that means, as soon as this quantity goes down to 0, this record here is going to disappear. We won't see this particular item tied to this particular bin. It'll disappear. So that's what we typically call like a floating warehouse, where you don't have fixed bins for specific items. When we put product away, we just choose whatever bin we want. It creates that record, and when that stock leaves that bin, that record disappears, and we don't match that specific item to that specific bin. Okay, so that's a little on the basic. Let's go back to the advanced here and have a quick peek, and you can see a bit of a difference here. So now on the zone code, we've got a whole bunch of different zone types like this bulk, and it tells us this is a put away only bin, and we've got maximum cubage and weights and a whole bunch of other things that we can set up, including the bin ranking. Okay, so these are all related to that advanced warehousing, which we'll get to in a sec. So when you're looking at this, when you're setting up your bins, if you don't have advanced warehousing turned on, and most of the time I recommend don't start with advanced warehousing, but when you're setting up your bins, you'll see all of this stuff. You can largely ignore all of that when you're setting up your bins. All you really care about is your bin code and maybe a description here if it's a special bin like shipping or something like that. All right, now once we've got the bin set up, I'm going to go back to our basic warehouse here. What you will do is also define special bins for receiving and shipping and production. Now, you'll notice here this receipt bin code is blank or disabled, and the shipment bin code is disabled, and that is because I don't have this set up to use a special bin for receiving or a special bin for shipping, right? So these two are turned off, which means we don't have a special bin for shipping or a special bin for receiving. But if you did have that turned on, you would indicate which bin you're using for shipping and which bin you're using for receiving. And that gets us the two-stage ship and receive that I'll get to in a sec. All right, so that's the basics of that. Now let's go back here. And I know that, we're covering off the high level topics here, right? There's a lot more to this. Typically, this type of discussion that you have with your implementation partner, before we get engaged for any extensions that you might want, these things can take, several days or weeks even to make these decisions about what you're going to do. Hopefully this is going to give you that at least, high level information so you can make some more informed decisions, or at least once you get into discussing this with your implementation partner, you know what the heck these terms mean. Now let's go back to inventory documents. So the inventory documents, when we talk about non-warehouse role centers, this is, there's a warehouse management role center and things like that deal more with the warehouse documents. You'll find this more in like the order processing role centers and things like that. Now, an inventory document, each inventory document, when I say document, I don't mean a piece of paper. I mean really a set of data within Business Central. So for example, a sales order is a document. If you open up a sales order in Business Central, we call that a document. Now, I can also open up what we call an inventory pick. And that inventory pick is a document. So it's just a bunch of data sitting in Business Central, and we call that a document. So those documents, those inventory documents, refer to one source document. So if I create an inventory pick, that's always going to refer to a source document like a sales order or transfer order, those types of things, okay? Or if I'm doing a put away, that'll refer to a purchase order or possibly a transfer order as well. So each inventory document is a one-to-one match to the sales document. Now, I lied there a little bit because I could have one sales order and I could actually have multiple inventory picks related to that sales document, but really you will never see more than one sales order on an inventory pick. And sticking with that inventory pick example, when I post that inventory pick, so I send out this inventory pick to the warehouse people, which means they don't actually see the sales order. What they see is the inventory pick document. When they post that inventory pick, it will also post the sales order. Okay, so it's a one-to-one. I say I'm done with my inventory pick. Okay, that means the sales order is shipped. Okay, so you can't say, hey, I've picked this thing, it's ready to ship. As soon as I say, yes, it's picked, that sales order ships. Okay, so that's what we call a single stage process. One person goes out, picks it, says I'm done, and it prints out the packing slip or whatever you've got it set up to do. Okay, and we usually create those inventory documents right from the source document. So if I'm on a sales order, I'll create the inventory pick right from the sales order, though you can create it independently as well. All right, so let's actually see what that looks like. So again, we've set up the silver location here. I've got require pick turned on, which means I can create an inventory pick for sales orders. I've got require put away, so I can create an inventory put away for purchase orders. And by the way, that's also for transfer orders and things like that as well. Any inbound or outbound stuff, I can create a pick for or a put away for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the sales orders. And we're going to bring up one of the sales orders in the silver location here. So we've got the sales order here. And when I open him up, we'll see we've got a few different items on it here that I can pick. And I wanted to mention this bin code here. If you have bins enabled, if you have bins mandatory, you almost always want to turn on at least inventory picks and possibly putaways. And the reason for that is if I have bins mandatory and I'm not using an inventory pick, that means on the sales line here, I have to specify which bin I'm shipping that product out of, okay? So that can be problematic. You don't want your sales order entry people choosing which bin this thing is supposed to come out of. Now, if you only have one bin per product, maybe that's not a big deal because it'll default in there and they won't have to do anything. But a problem might arise where I have this item in two separate bins. Maybe I have it in my normal stocking bin and I also have it in an overstock area. Well, if I don't have inventory picks enabled, what I'd have to do is I'd have to have two lines on the sales order, one for each bin that I'm picking from. So again, when we make bins mandatory, we have to specify that bin code for every transaction that we do. Now you'll notice in this case, those bin codes are blank. And the reason for that is because I can use an inventory pick. And the inventory pick is going to take all of this information and it's going to determine which bin I can actually pick from. And it could split up one of these lines into multiple bins. And the sales order stays the same. The sales order isn't impacted. So the way we do that is if I come in here and I go to the warehouse, I can create my inventory, put away, and pick. And when I hit that, what it's going to do is it's going to ask me some questions here, and I'm just going to hit OK. There's a few other things you can do, like print it out at the same time. And when I do that, it's going to go out. It's going to create that inventory pick for me, and we're done. In theory, I've printed that out for the warehouse personnel, and away they go. Now, if we want to look at it, I can actually get to it from here as well. I can drill down into my inventory pick and put away lines. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the role center and we're going to open it up. Now you'll notice here it says picks. That doesn't help me much. If you look at the tooltip, it says warehouse pick because I'm in the warehouse management system role center here. So as I mentioned earlier, that is all sort of warehouse document oriented. This is not inventory pick. So there's two different types of picks. There's the warehouse pick and there's the inventory pick. So for me to get to the inventory pick, I'll actually have to search for it, right? So there's my inventory picks. And any of those inventory documents will say inventory in front of them. So if you're looking for an inventory pick, it'll be called an inventory pick. If you're looking for a warehouse pick, it's just going to be called a pick. right? So a little confusing there as well. But there's the guy I created, and we can tell it's the one I created because that's the sales order I used. And here's all of the content from that sales order, and it's identifying the bin I need to pick from. Okay, so that is how we create an inventory document. Now, the other way I could have done it is if I just delete this, right? So I created it from the sales order. If you want your warehouse personnel doing it, they can come in, you know, they'll default in probably to their location that they're set up as a warehouse employee. And they'll say, okay, what sales orders can I pick today? It'll give them all the released orders for that location. They choose it, and it brings in all the lines that they need to pick. So again, we typically want to do it from the sales order, or you may want to automate it, have your partner write some code that automatically creates that inventory pick. Now, when we execute the pick, if you're doing this paper-based, of course, I would probably print this out. And incidentally, on that last screen when I was on the sales order and I created it, and one of the options was to print it, that's where you want to use something like our print node connector. Not to try and upsell you, but the print node connector is free. So, you know, I'll put a plug in for that, because if I hit print, then that report just magically prints out on the warehouse printer for you. Okay. But if I print this now, you know, the warehouse personnel can take it, they can write stuff in, and then when they come back, I'll enter the quantity they actually picked, right, in this quantity to handle. That tells us what's actually being picked. Quantity handled is what we've already done so far. And when they're done, they're just going to go ahead and post. And I'll just post the shipment here, right? So you can actually invoice from the inventory pick. And when I do this, that is actually posting the sales order at the same time and shipping it out and printing the packing slip or whatever you've got set up for that particular shipment. Okay, so that's basically it. Now you can see the one that I fully picked is gone, that line that's gone, and we can see these other two were partially picked, and now I can finish picking the remainder of them. Okay, so that's how an inventory pick works. Okay, and the same thing for a put away. Put away from a purchase order, I'll create an inventory put away. I'll come in here, indicate what I put away, where I've put it, and post it, and the system will update accordingly. All right. So there's a ton of questions, and I apologize I'm not keeping up with most of these questions, but we'll hopefully cover them off when we get to it. So again, inventory pick one-to-one with the sales order. As soon as I post that pick, it's out the door. So that doesn't lend itself to having somebody pick it, bring it over to a packing station, somebody packaging it up, and then getting it out the door. So to do that, what we do is we use the warehouse documents. And the warehouse documents allow us to do a bunch of stuff. In the simplest case, what it allows us to do is have a two-stage process. And what that means is I can pick everything from the warehouse, say I've completed this pick, and what that will do is now say, okay, that pick is done. We're going to move the product out of the warehouse bins and put it into my shipping bin. Okay, so if we go back to that warehouse configuration, that location configuration where I showed you the shipping bin and the receiving bin, that's what those are for. So I execute the pick. It basically does an inventory movement, if you will, a bin to bin movement, moves all the product out of the bin, puts it in the shipping area, and now allows somebody else to take over and actually process the shipment. Okay. The other thing on that is if I process a warehouse pick, it's not going to post that sales order, right? Because it's just moving the product from one bin to another, and I have to deal with the warehouse shipment to actually post that sales order. Okay, so let's actually see what that looks like if I use the warehouse documents instead. Okay, so same idea. I'm going to go into my sales orders here, and I'm going to open up this guy here for my location that does have the warehouse shipments and warehouse picks enabled. This happens to be my advanced warehousing location, but it doesn't really matter. So let's actually look at that real quick, just for fun. So here I've got this directed put away and pick enabled, and that forces all of these other things on. If I didn't have this turned on, I would be able to manipulate these independently. But the bottom line is I've got require shipment turned on and I've got require pick turned on. And what that does now is gives me that two-stage picking process. I need to use what we call a warehouse shipment document, and from that, I'm going to have a pick document as well. Okay, so that's what we have turned on now. And if I scroll down, you'll notice we have in here, we've identified the bin I'm going to be using as my default shipping bin. So what that allows me to do is now when I pick, all the product's going to get moved into this bin and get ready for staging for shipping. Okay, now let's go ahead and see what this looks like when I'm on the sales order. So now on the sales order, I will mention one thing. I didn't show you on the basic stuff, but if I try and enter a quantity to ship here, it's going to yell at me and say I'm not allowed to do that because I need to use a warehouse shipment. If you're using inventory picks, the system still allows you to do this and still allows you to post that shipment without having that pick enabled. But in this case, it's telling me I have to have a warehouse pick. Now, there's a number of different ways we can create warehouse picks. And again, if we want to do it sort of order to order, what I would do is from the sales order, this is typically what happens, is we'll create the warehouse shipment right here. And quite often partners will set up a process for you that as soon as you release the sales order, it automatically creates the warehouse shipment for you. Okay. Now, when I do that, it's going to come in and it's going to create that warehouse shipment and it's going to show me the shipment. Up at the top here, as compared to the inventory pick, you'll notice this does not reference a specific sales order at all. Okay, the sales order is actually referenced down here on the lines itself. And what that implies, and what it actually means in addition to implying it, is that we can have multiple sales orders on the shipment. So that is another big advantage of using warehouse shipments, is I could actually have one truckload going out or one pallet or whatever that consists of multiple different sales orders. And I can list all of those different sales orders on this warehouse shipment here. And I've got one document to deal with every sales order. Okay, so an alternate way of creating these sales or these warehouse shipments is I could have just created one from scratch, come in, and then use this get source documents to pull in all the sales orders, all the transfer orders, everything else I need to ship in this particular shipment. So it allows us to consolidate a whole bunch of different sales orders, transfer orders, whatever you want, on a single shipment document. Okay, and then there's another tool in here for using the filters. So for example, if I want to prepare all my UPS guys all at once, I can come in here and I can define a rule that says, hey, I want to pull in, all my, sales orders that are going UPS. And when I hit OK on this, well, not on this, but when I run this, what it'll do is it'll pull all the sales orders in for UPS onto my one shipment document. And this could act like a manifest for you, for your UPS shipments. Okay, so the warehouse shipments allow us to come in and bring in multiple orders at the same time. If you don't care about that, if you do all your stuff order to order picking, I create that warehouse shipment from the sales order and I'm good to go. Now at this point, what I need to do, is create a pick ticket for it. I still need a pick document. If you don't have picks enabled, so if we go back to the locations, which I won't, I could turn on shipments without turning on picks. And what that means is I can just come in here and enter the quantity I'm going to ship and ship it out the door without doing any pick activity whatsoever. If I try it here, it's going to yell at me because I've got that setting turned on that says, hey, you need to actually pick that product. Now, this error message isn't all that useful, but what it's telling me is I haven't picked any yet, and I need to pick them before I can actually try and ship them. Okay, so what that means is we've got a pick document required. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say I've completed this. I'm going to release it. And then I'm going to go in and create my pick document from this. Okay. Now there's another mechanism for creating these pick documents in bulk, but I'm going to do this here right from the sales shipment. So you can see it starts getting a little bit onerous, right? Now I've got really 3 documents defined for that one sales order. I've got the sales order, I've got a warehouse shipment, and now I've also got a warehouse pick document, all defined just to pick that product out of the warehouse. So let's actually open this up and see what that pick looks like. So here's the actual pick that I have. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I lied. This is this guy here. Okay, so here's the pick that I've got. Now, we've got a bit of an issue on this pick. First of all, when we talk about warehouse picks, it's always a two-step process, right? We pick it, we drop it off at shipping, and out the door it goes. So this is what it's telling us to do. It's saying take this product from bin 0201 and place this product in bin 0901. And that bin 0901 is our shipping bin. Okay, so we always have two lines, at least two lines for every product. I could decide I want to pick, split this up into 3 or 4 different bins, and you can go ahead and split that line into multiple bins, those sorts of things if you like. But this is telling us, we've got pick this product and take it over here. And you'll notice that we only have this one item on here. That shipment actually had 2 items. If you don't have stock for an item, it will not generate a pick line for you. So it's only going to generate a pick ticket, a pick document, a warehouse pick in this case, for the product you have in stock. If you have the advanced warehousing turned on, you can have it generate a line even though you don't have the product in stock, but it won't know where to take it from and it'll leave the bin blank. And that's an important thing to remember, because we can't fully ship that shipment. We can only pick that one item. Now, another thing to note on this is that we've got that same sales order listed here. And what that also implies, just like on the warehouse shipment, I could actually have multiple sales orders on this pick document. And I can actually have multiple warehouse shipments on this pick document. So when we get into warehouse picks, we start really opening the doors. We can pick multiple orders on the same pick ticket. We can pick multiple shipments on the same pick ticket. We can split up one order into multiple pick tickets. So as soon as we get into warehouse picks, we get into sort of the batching capability where I can split things up, combine things, do all sorts of things to control how I manage my picks. Okay, but here the way this works is if I come in and I handle this pick and I go ahead and register it. Now the registering again doesn't actually do anything to inventory. All it's doing is moving the product from the bin 0201 to my shipping bin and telling the system this product is now ready to ship, and I can now go ahead and post this shipment and wherever it is, post this shipment and ship that sales order. Until now, nothing has happened to that sales order. We've just indicated we've picked that product. Okay, so that's a little bit on the warehouse documents. Enables a two-stage processing, right? Allows us to separate the sales order from the warehouse activities, and is a little bit cumbersome if you don't have some automation in place to automatically generate the shipments and things like that. And there are tools that help you with that. But out of the box, that's what you would do. You would come in, you'd either go to a warehouse shipment, choose all your sales orders that are going out UPS or going out by a certain day or for a specific customer, generate your warehouse shipment. From that, generate your pick ticket, execute it, and drop it off. Okay, and then post that shipment at the end. All right, so that's a little bit on the two-stage warehouse documents. All right. I told you, very basic overview on all of this. At least gives you the information you need to ask the right questions when you're talking to your implementation partner about how you want to do. And typically what I do, I should back up here before I start talking about bins. Typically what I do is I tell people, figure out what your best practice physical process is. Like, how do you want your warehouse to run? Is your picker your shipper? Is he going to run out, grab stuff, and then post that shipment immediately? Or do you have that two-stage process where you go out, pick things, drop it off at shipping, and somebody else packages it up and gets it out the door, right? Or do you even need any of that? Do you need bins turned on? Like, don't turn bins on if you don't need them. Same thing on receiving, right? Do you put product away as you're receiving it? If so, use an inventory put away. Or do you receive it in sort of the receiving area and then do a secondary activity to put it away? If you do that latter side, then you use the warehouse putaways, right? You turn on require receipt and require put away. Or maybe you don't care. You get the PO in and you receive it into the default bins because that'll be on the PO lines, and you don't need to turn any of that stuff on. So again, figure out where your best practice physical process is, and then figure out which settings are going to match that process as closely as possible. All right. And one of those decision points is on bins. So, in the basic warehousing, right, where I do an inventory pick or even a warehouse pick, but I don't have the directed put away and pick turned on, the bin selection is pretty basic, right? It doesn't really have any significant intelligence about where to put product away, where to pick product from. It's basically going to start in alphabetical order. It's going to find the first bin with the product and pick as much out of that bin as possible. And if it hasn't fulfilled that pick quantity, it's going to look at the next bin in that order, and it's just going to keep going until it's fulfilled that, right? So it's not really intelligent. It's not going to say, oh, this is your pick area, that's your highest priority bin, you want to pick from there first, or I'm not allowed to pick from my overstock area. So it's not smart enough to, really do a lot. A couple of options are, the dedicated bins I mentioned briefly earlier. What that allows you to do is prevent picking from specific bins. And so those are often used in production and areas like that, where you can say, hey, this bin is specifically tied to this production area, so nobody's allowed to pick from it. I'm going to move product into that, and then it's going to be used by production and nobody else. But you can use that to prevent picking from specific bins if you wanted. So that is one way to prevent it. And then to move product out of those bins, you would do a movement, right? So you do in basic warehousing, a movement is typically a reclassification journal to move product from bin to bin. There is something called an inventory movement as well, but that's typically used, as a pick more than just moving product from bin to bin. So when you look at what you need from bins, and the same thing on the putaways. I talked about picking there, but if I receive product and I have rules about where that product needs to go, right? If I receive a pallet, I'm not going to go and put that in my pick area. I want to put that in my bulk storage area. And then I don't want anybody picking off that pallet, right? If we don't have product in the picking area, I want to move it out of my bulk storage area into my picking area, right? I don't want to overfill a bin, right? If I can store a maximum of 100 in a bin, and I've received 200, I don't want the system going and telling me to put it in that bin that can't fit it, right? Those types of things. If you have basic warehousing turned on, it doesn't look at any of that. And because of that, you might want to consider the advanced warehousing or the directed put away and pick. All right, so the directed put away and pick does a lot of stuff. And again, just to reiterate, I usually tell people don't turn on directed put away unless you're sure you need it. Start without it, try it out, do a proof of concept or a trial, and make sure you know what you're getting into when you turn on this directed put away and pick. All right, so when you turn on that directed put away and pick, it, as you saw, it forces most options to be enabled, right? So you can't get away from the two-stage processes or anything like that. Enables those zones that we talked about. And the zone allows us to define bin types. So we can say, hey, this bin only allows us to put product away in it. We're not allowed to pick from it, right? And that's good for your bulk storage area. Or we can say it's something like a QC bin where we're not allowed to pick or put away into that bin. We're only allowed to move product in and out of that bin with a different process. This is another key point here. What it does is it disconnects your warehouse inventory from your item subledger, from your item ledger entries. What that means is I could negative adjust product out of my warehouse and my quantity on hand on the item card will stay the same because we are not updating that inventory ledger entry when we do that warehouse adjustment. There's a separate process you need to use to marry up your item ledger entries and your on-hand inventory with what we've said is in the warehouse. Okay, so that's a big one because that adds an extra step that sometimes is pointless. Say if I negative adjust 10 out of stock or adjust 2 into stock, like that's what's there. I don't want to run a separate process to marry everything up. The reason that's there is it does allow potentially warehouse personnel to make those edits and have somebody in accounting finalize them or a supervisor finalize them before they actually get posted as adjustments, but there's possibly other ways to do that. And this last one, it provides tools to optimize the warehouse. That's typically the movement worksheet. So because you can set up things like bin rankings and different types of bins, It allows us to do things like say, hey, I've got a whole bunch of stuff in my bulk storage area. Tell me when my picking area gets low on stock, and then automatically generate an instruction to move product out of bulk storage into my picking area. Okay, so that replenishment process is only available with directed put away and pick, which is annoying because it's an artificial constraint. You could actually very easily make that replenishment process work with basic warehousing, but they've said that you can only use it with advanced. All right, so why would you want to use directed put away and pick? If you have the same item in multiple bins, I used that example before with the overstock and the pick bin, those types of things, it can be handy because it's got better intelligence about which bin to use to pick from, right? If I've got stuff sitting on the top shelf and I've got, the pickable stuff sitting on the main shelf, I want to focus on the pickable stuff before I even start thinking about the top shelf. Right? Directed put away can help with that, or pick and put away can help with that. Multiple units of measure. So when we talk about the bin contents, if you're using basic warehousing, it only stores things in the base unit of measure. Okay, even if I receive something as a box, right? If I've got eaches and boxes set up for that item, I buy it in a box, I receive it as a box, I put away as a box. If I look in inventory, it's going to say eaches. Right? With basic warehousing, it does not care about units of measure. It's going to store it in the base unit of measure. If you need to store different units of measure in the warehouse, you're going to need to turn on directed put away and pick. Now, I typically also recommend against that, at least in the picking bins. Right? Sure, you can have cartons in your overstock, and when you move it into the picking bin, you can do what we call a break bulk, where we break that carton out into pieces and move it over into the picking area. But if you've got cartons and eaches in your picking area, that's just a recipe for disaster. Somebody's sooner or later, guaranteed, is going to pick one carton instead of one piece and ship that sucker, and you don't want that. So try to avoid those multiple units of measure. The other one is if bins aren't fixed. Right, so we talked about that before, where we can tie an item to a specific bin. If you have more of a floating warehouse where you don't care where you put the product away when you receive it, you just want to find the best spot for it, directed put away can help you with that, because you can set up rules that says, oh, that's a big pallet, put it over here, or that's a small quantity and my pick bin is low, put it there. It can make some of those decisions for you to help manage your floating warehouse. If you have fixed spots for your individual items, right, fixed bins, then that directed put away doesn't really help you much. Okay. And then if you have things like wave picking, or if you want to pick by zone, right, you've got a cooler zone that has special equipment associated with that cooler or freezer, or if you want to break up a pick ticket between the cooler and the main dry goods area or something like that, then you might want to look at the directed pick and put away, because you can segregate out those picks by the different zones. So that can enable wave picking, can enable storage of allergens in one area versus a different area. All of those sorts of things can come into play when you can break stuff up by zone. And you can also do that with basic warehousing with bin naming conventions, but it's not as formal and it's not enforced. All right. So when not to do directed put away and pick is basically if you don't need any of those things, don't use directed put away and pick. And again, normally start without it. You can turn it on after the fact, right? It's not just turning on the checkbox. There's a little bit extra work you need to do, but it's pretty straightforward. Any partner that's done any warehouse work will know how to do that. It's pretty quick and easy to turn it on after the fact if you need it, and away you go. You could also turn it off after the fact. It's also a little bit of work to turn it off after the fact, but typically start without it, see how you go, and then turn it on if you need it. All right, so let's go in and have a quick peek at what the directed stuff gives us. So a couple of things I'll mention. The warehouse item journal, like I said, if I want to do an inventory adjustment on something, right, I'll just pick an item here, right? So we pick an item and then we choose a bin to place that item in, right? And I'm going to adjust it by 10. And if I come in here and I look at the item card real quick, not that you shouldn't trust me, right? You know I'm telling you the truth. It says I have 15 on hand, right? So that's what I have on hand. So if I come in here and I post this positive adjustment of 10, by the way, it's a little different in the item journal. If I want to do a negative adjustment, I have to put negative 10. But anyway, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to post that sucker there, It's going to post that adjustment. And now if I come and look at that item again, right? So we open up that item. Sorry, I'm just going to do that. You'll notice I still have 15 on hand. So that positive adjustment didn't do anything. Again, the directed pick and put away breaks the connection between the item ledger entries and the warehouse entries. Okay, so I have to run a separate process on the item journal to sync all of that stuff up. What happens is anytime I do an adjustment in the warehouse, it puts it in something called the adjustment bin, and I have to run that process to pull it out of the adjustment bin. And the same thing goes for physical inventory as well. It's a two-step process. Now, the other one that is nice to have in directed pick and put away is the movement worksheet. Because what the movement worksheet allows us to do is, again, go in and say, you know what, I'm going to come in and you tell me what I need to move around within the warehouse to optimize anything. And I've got nothing to replenish. But what it will do is it'll come in and say, hey, your pick bin is low, but you've got some in bulk storage, and it'll generate that instruction to move product from one bin to another very easily. Okay, so that's the movement worksheet. That's what it adds. And then finally, just to, sort of overdo the configuration, when we've got that turned on, we've got a bunch of other options that we can enable as well that we don't have time to get into, but things like some of the bin policies and the put away templates that you can use to define rules for how things get put away. Okay. All right. Now, just in the interest of time, I'm going to get back to this and talk about one last thing that there were questions on. Item tracking, serial numbers and lot numbers. Okay. We've looked at a lot of different configurations for the warehouse itself. When we get into serial numbers and lot numbers, that just multiplies the complexity out on those different configurations, because there are a whole bunch of different ways we can set up lot tracking and serial tracking. I'm going to focus on lot tracking for this discussion. So when we set up the lot tracking, we can set up non-mandatory, or what we call non-specific lot tracking or serial tracking. We can set up specific tracking, which means we need to specify that lot number, a valid lot number on every transaction. And then we can set up lot warehouse tracking or serial warehouse tracking. And that warehouse tracking now tells us which bin each serial number and lot number is in. Okay, so we have now 3 pieces of information we need to deal with when we're talking about an item. We've got the item, we've got the bin, and we've got the lot number or serial number. And all of those 3 need to match in order for us to process any transaction. Just like the advanced warehousing, I typically caution against turning this on unless you absolutely need to use it. Okay, and a lot of people say, okay, we need to know which lot number is in which bin, because we need to know which product is expiring first. That's this FIFO, right? FIFO is first expired, first out. If we turn on the lot warehouse tracking and the expiry dates, then the system will go out and tell us to pick the oldest product first, or the first expiring product first. And people think they need to do that. Quite often, well, a lot of people are going to argue, Mark, you're dumb, and you can't get on audio here, so I'll do it for you. You're dumb. You need to have that FIFO picking. The problem is with FIFO picking is it's often not practical from an operational perspective, right? So for example, if I've got 10 kilogram bags of flour out there and they expire 1 day apart, and the system needs 1 bag, and I have to have 4 kilograms sitting in a bin for some reason that expires 1 day later, it's going to send me to pick 4 kilograms from that bin and send me to pick 6 kilograms from the other bin. So now I got to break apart a 10 kilogram bag of flour to meet that pick, where I could have just grabbed that 10 kilogram bag and met that pick in one shot without the system telling me what I'm supposed to do. And the downside of that, of course, is now that 4 kilogram leftover bag might sit there forever because everybody's just picking full bags. But that's going to happen anyway, right? If you don't have people that are diligent with the processes, they're going to do whatever they want anyway, regardless of what the system is telling them to do. So sometimes people think they need to enable FIFO to make sure they're picking the first expired product first, but quite often that's just going to cause you pain. All right, so let's actually have a look at what item tracking can do for you. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to go into a sales order, and we're going to open up this guy here, I think. And this one has 3 items on it. We've got a normal cable that's tracked, like it's got lot numbers associated with it. We've got one that's tracked at the warehouse level, so we know which lot numbers are in which bin. And we've got another one that's got expiry dates associated with it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, and I think I already created a pick for this. So we're going to just see if I have any documents on this. I do. So here's the warehouse shipment for this document, right? So this is all the product I need to pick. This is pretty straightforward. I need 5 of each. Let's actually have a look at what that pick document looks like. So we're going to go into the pick document, and here's where it gets a little bit messy. Wakey, wakey. All right, so again, we've got, take place. I'm just going to filter on the take. By the way, if you don't know the hotkey, if you select a field and you hit Alt F3, it'll do a filter on that and just filter to that, right? So rather than having to show the filter view and everything else. Anyway, so here's that first item where we need to pick 5. So we're getting those 5 out of this particular bin. And you'll see this lot number field here. If I try and enter a lot number there, it's not going to be happy about it. Okay, and the reason is this one, the warehouse documents don't care about the lot numbers, right? This one only has lot numbers set up at the source document level. Okay, you notice it says warehouse item tracking is not enabled. So what we do when we enter lot numbers for this, we actually have to enter it at the sales order level, or we have to come in here and enter it at, clicking the wrong stuff, or we have to come in here and enter it at the source document level, right? So this is where we'd enter the lot numbers for this, is right on that sales order. Okay, so we don't enter the lot numbers on the warehouse shipment, but it makes it easy because now I can come in, I can grab whatever lot numbers I want. The next one, this one knows which bin holds which lot number. Now these are all coming out of the same bin, but you can see it's broken up that one line of 5 into 3 different pick lines here, because it's telling us pick these 3 lot numbers that I happen to know live in this bin. So it already is telling us which lot numbers to pick. If I get to that bin and I want to pick lot number 7 because it's in front and these guys are buried under 2 tons worth of product, I'm out of luck. I have to pick these lot numbers. Now I can come in here and change these if I really wanted. And the last one is the one with the expiry. And the same thing here, it's come in and it's broken that up into a whole bunch of different lines and potentially different bins to pick from based on the lot numbers that are going to expire first. Okay, so these lot numbers are completely out of order. They're random effectively based on the expiration date. So as a picker, I'd have to go through and dig through all of that product to find these lot numbers versus just grabbing the ones that are in front. Okay, so those are the 3 examples of how it works, right? So one is if we don't have the warehouse or the lot warehouse tracking turned on, I can just go pick these 5, specify the lot numbers independently of the pick document. If I've got the tracking turned on, it'll tell me which lot numbers to pick and I can override them if I want. And if I've got FIFO turned on, it's going to choose the earliest expiry first and tell me to pick those. All right, so it can get complex. Again, the lot warehouse tracking can add a lot of value if there's recalls and things like that, but depending on the amount of inventory turns you have, you may want to consider not using that because you've got one extra piece of data you need to deal with. Key thing there is, it's very hard to turn that on after the fact. If you don't turn it on up front, it's really hard to turn it on later on down the road. Okay, all right. Now, I went way over and talked too slow. I needed more coffee this morning. So that looked quite complicated, right? Lots of different options, lots of different scary things in there that you have to think about and consider. And very, very high level overview of all that. You need to go in and test those things out yourself. Some of the things that can help you with that down the road, we do have these products. The WMS Express is the free version. So if you've got your basic warehouse set up and you just want to start doing barcode and start simplifying some of those processes like automatic creation of receipts and things like that, grab Warehouse WMS Express, completely free, plug it in, no registration, and go, and you've now added barcoding and streamlined some of those processes we've just looked at, or Warehouse Insight for the full one. We didn't talk about inventory counts today because we wouldn't have time. But if you, to audit your inventory, you can use that. The order fulfillment worksheet, which is out later this year, will allow you to streamline the creation of your picks and your warehouse shipments and everything else and automate them. So it saves like half of what I talked about today. The order fulfillment worksheet will automate. And then the cycle count scheduler, same idea, just makes it easy to audit your inventory regardless of whether you have bins on or advanced warehousing or anything else. All right. Now, if you do have any additional questions, and sorry, just given the time, I didn't get to many of the questions in the chat, you can get a hold of us, check out the website and the knowledge base. And again, talk to your implementation partner about any of the questions you have on this. Before you engage with any of our products, if you decide to use them, you need that basic Business Central configuration set before we engage with you. All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and hopefully that was added a little bit of value for you. Thanks everyone.
Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great content.